welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all our 6th graders out there, though everyone is welcome to tune in. This is the last lesson in this week's series. My name is Megan Gilly and I'm a 6th grade teacher in Tennessee schools. I'm extremely excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lessons, or you would like to visit this lesson, you may go to the Tennessee Department of Education's website at www.tn.gov/education. You, of course, can still tune in to today's lesson, but it might be more fun if you go back and watch our other lessons since we'll be talking about things that we've previously learned. Today we will be reading a poem about sticky rice. Before we get started, to participate fully in our lesson today, you need the following materials: paper, pen or pencil, a surface to write on, and the student packet for ELA Grade 6, Lesson 20, which can be found at the Tennessee Department of Education's website using the link on your screen. If you don't have that student packet, it is okay. It's a text to follow along with. You can follow me on the screen and your own sheet of paper. So let's go ahead and begin. In our last lesson, we did a close read of the article, A Taste of Sticky Rice, Laos's national dish, and looked for how the author conveyed the idea that eating sticky rice is essential for survival for the people in Laos. We found that farmers needed this crop to support themselves and their families, and that sticky rice helped keep people fuller longer than other foods. In the first 4 lessons in this series, we have focused a lot on informational text. Today, our goal is to read and understand a poem about sticky rice. We will read and analyze the poem together, and then there will be time for you to practice some analysis on your own with my support. Finally, I will assign you an independent work that you can complete after the video ends. We've learned a lot about the country of Laos, the Laotian people, and sticky rice by reading and studying the informational article, A Taste of Sticky Rice, Laos's national dish. Let's review some of that information before we read our poem today. So what is it that we learned about the country of Laos? Do you remember where it was in the world? Well, hopefully this might look familiar to you. Remember that Laos is a small, landlocked country, meaning not right next to water. It's a country that's located in Southeast Asia, just below China. When we look closer at the map of Laos, we see that it borders several other countries. Again, remember, landlocked means that they do not have immediate access to water or ocean for trading with other countries. So again, if they want to import, meaning buy, or export, meaning sell, products to other countries, then they must go through one of the 5 countries they border to do so. As I read a paragraph from the text, I want you to listen for words that describe the land in Laos. And we read this in our previous lesson, but here it is again. Sticky rice grows in Laotian lowlands and uplands. Lowland farmers plant it in flooded paddies, which you can see in the lower left, and upland farmers intercrop it on hillsides, which you can see in the right picture, with companion crops like taro, cassava, and chili peppers. Because hillsides generally receive less predictable supplies of water than paddies do, hillside rice fields tend to be more susceptible to drought. So how is the land described? Yes, sticky rice is grown in the lowlands, and upland seems to grow better, in the water-filled lowlands. In this paragraph, the author also tells us that there's other crops grown along with sticky rice, especially in the uplands. The farmers battled drought there and rodent infestations. So what did we learn about sticky rice? Well, let's read from another paragraph. But sticky rice is still the primary staple in Laos and parts of the 5 countries bordering it: China, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. In Laos, slightly larger in area than Utah, per capita sticky rice consumption is the highest on earth at more than 345 pounds per year. The average American, by contrast, eats less than 20 pounds of rice annually, according to the United States Food and Drug Administration. I'm taken aback by that detail again, that Laos people eat more than 345 pounds per year per person, and Americans, by contrast, eat less than 20 pounds of rice. That means here that sticky rice is this main staple of Laotian culture. One of those things is that it keeps them fuller longer. And in the narrative part of the text, Luck, the main character, both the author and Luck ate their sticky rice with their hands, and the author referred to that as Laotian style. So there's a certain cultural heritage that goes along with it. So let's think about how the author showed some characteristics of Laotian people in this text that we read previously. But Evans, the author of several books about Laos, also says he doesn't know a single Laotian person who never eats sticky rice. From a cultural perspective, he explained, sticky rice is still the way of Lao identify themselves. Sticky rice figures in religious traditions across Laos, where the predominant faith is Theravada Buddhism. During the popular Basi ceremony, uncooked sticky rice grains are tossed into the air after communal prayers. And when a Laotian is dying, a village elder may rub sticky rice on the person and throw the rice away to banish bad spirits. The threat of hunger didn't diminish their hospitality. So how do the people see sticky rice as part of their lives? Exactly. They identify themselves with sticky rice. Sticky rice is even so much a part of their religious traditions. And I think the most inspiring thing about the people of Laos is their hospitality. That even though there were many people that didn't have much, they were still willing to share with their neighbors and strangers. So I think you'll be surprised to see how the knowledge that you've gained from the informational text is going to help you to better understand the poem that we will read today. Just a reminder, typically when we study literary text, we refer to the person who wrote the text as an author. For poetry, we call them a poet. And while we talk about a narrator in stories, we also use the term speaker. So let's get started to see what the poet wrote today. Today we are going to read the poem Ode to Cow Now, Sticky Rice. Cow Now, again, is sticky rice in Laotian, and an ode is a poem that pays tribute to or praises a specific thing. In our poem today, of course, the author is writing an ode to sticky rice. The poem might look a little different from the poems that you're used to because the poem is written in free verse, which means that the poem does not rhyme and it doesn't have a predictable pattern. I love free verse. A lot of the times it sounds just like a regular conversation. Poems in general can be tricky to understand, so as we read, we're going to pause to analyze certain lines to better comprehend what the author is saying, or the poet is saying. There will be even times when we need to analyze a single word just to get a better understanding of what we're reading. To help us organize our thoughts, I want you to go ahead and make a T-chart that looks like this on your piece of paper. On the left-hand side, label the column text, and on the right-hand side, jot analysis. So on your screen is an example. And as we read, I might ask you to jot down a line or a word in the left-hand column, meaning what the text says, and then we'll write our analysis or interpretation of what that line or word means or refers to in the right-hand column. I'm excited, so let's go ahead and get started. Food to cow now, again meaning sticky rice. I meet you in Laos as a seed, just a simple existence of hard rice. Okay, so before I read any further, I want you to understand who this poem is about. In the first line, it says, I meet you in Laos. I meet you. So look carefully at the poem so far, and you can look ahead too. Who do you think I is, and who do you think you is? Think about that for just a second. And I want you to write that down under text. I meet you in Laos as a seed, just a simple existence of hard rice. Yeah, I think here the speaker meets sticky rice. I meet you in Laos. So the speaker, the poet, is meeting the sticky rice in Laos. So that's a hard question. But this is an example of what we call personification, which is hopefully not a new term for you. Remember, personification is when the poet gives human characteristics to non-human things. As we keep reading, just pay attention to personification. It's a type of figurative language that is used frequently throughout poetry. So now that we have updated our chart, remember every time that you see the word I, it refers to the speaker, and every time we see you, it's referring to a single grain of sticky rice. Let's start from the top again. I meet you in Laos as a seed, just a simple existence of hard rice, seated inside Hue She dirt, until water plains cradle and nourish your infant body. Those are some interesting lines. So let's make sure that we understand it. On your chart, under the text, I want you to write a couple of things. I want you to write Hue She, which we'll talk about in a second. I want you to write water plains, and then I want you to write down infant body. And I want you to try to think about what these phrases mean on the analysis side. So analysis is trying to figure out what it's saying. And I'll help you with the first one because it says seated inside, meaning buried inside Hue She. I can infer that this is referring to a location. So I would say that Hue She is a town in Laos. Water plains, until water plains. I want you to think about that. Water plains are those rice paddies. Remember, they're the lowland areas that accumulate water. Those are called rice paddies. And cradle and nourish your infant body. Think about that. To cradle and nourish the rice seeds. That's what the rice paddies are for. So let's continue reading on to the next few lines. Till you sprout above water banks, where you tickle yourself with sunshine like a child who spends all day with the wind. So here's a couple more great things for us to take a closer look at. Can you find the simile in this section by chance? Again, a simile using the words like or as to make a comparison. Yeah, like a child who spends all day with the wind. What is the poet comparing a child who spends all day with the wind? Who is like a child? Yeah, it's referring to the rice plants. So when you grow rice on it, it looks like a field of tall grass, similar to what you see in the picture on your screen. So when we look at the text, I want you to write, like a child who spends all day with the wind. And what is that referring to? Well, it's referring to the rice plants growing and blowing in the wind. So the author is using a simile here to make that comparison. So jot that down on the left. Like a child who spends all day with the wind. It's referring to rice plants growing and blowing in the wind. And let's keep reading. When you mature, people pull your roots, carry you in bulk back home along with your friends. So what happens when the crops mature? That's right. When crops are ready, we pick them. When they're ready to be picked, we harvest them. We pick them. So what do you think the poet means here by your friends? Carry you back home along with your friends. You're right. I think the author is referring to the other grains of sticky rice. So this is another example of personification. A single grain of rice has a bunch of other rice friends. So on the left-hand side of your chart, I want you to write next to number 6 there. You'll see your friends is from the text. What is that referring to? Well, the other grains of sticky rice, which is an example of personification. Like I said, there's a lot of figurative language that is used throughout poetry in general, and so we can see how the author is using it here to help get us a better understanding of sticky rice. It's easier for us as a reader to connect to. Let's keep reading. Moisten your skin, steam under flames in boiling water, only a bath where dirt splashes off while you try to hold breaths underwater. Your skin does not wrinkle, only softens to stick with other rice and sink in perfection. I want you to visualize, what do you think is happening here? And it might be hard for you if you've never made rice in general before, especially sticky rice, or have seen it made, but I bet a few of you know exactly what's happening here. In this section, the poet is using descriptive language to show that the harvested sticky rice, meaning what they picked, is now being cooked, and you can see as that's shown in the picture. To cook rice, you have to bring water to a boil and then simmer the rice in hot water until the water disappears. Can you find an example of personification in this section? Great, where it says that you hold while you try to hold your breaths underwater. So people breathe, not rice, but in this case, when you cook rice, all the grains are sinking to the bottom so they can be submerged under the water and cooked properly. This is the poet's way of describing that scene so we can visualize how the rice is cooked. So let's include that on our chart. Number 7, holds breath underwater. And what is that referring to? Again, it's another example of personification to show how rice is being cooked. We're going to go back 2 lines and then continue reading on. To stick with other rice and sink in perfection of the basket, where my mother's hands shake and shuffle you into a ball to roll on a plate, now fully grown, ready to liberate our hunger with your body. That is how we meet. So far, we've read about rice seeds being planted in rice paddies, being collected and harvested, and being cooked. So what does this section of the text show us? Notice the last 4 lines. Now fully grown, ready to liberate our hunger with your body. That is how we meet. It means that the rice, is being served to be eaten at this point. And it might sound like a sad thing for the rice, but the poet continuously uses words to imply that there's joy and love that exists in the process of making sticky rice and eating it. Have you noticed the words throughout, like cradle and nourish, tickle and sunshine? Those all have what we call a positive connotation to them. Even the phrase here, my mother's hands, it has such a calming effect, And so odes are typically happy poems. They're really a poem to show a person's gratitude about something. So keep that in mind as we continue on. But before we do, let's add to our chart, now fully grown means that the rice is ready to eat. So on the left, jot down now fully grown, and on the right, ready to eat. Also want you to take a look at the phrase to liberate our hunger. The word liberate means to be free, so it frees us of the hunger that we feel whenever they eat it. The sticky rice is filling for them is what the author is trying to show. Let's continue reading. Every day, even now, when I chew you in big bites, you never fail to fill my head with steam and make my tummy your cozy home. Sometimes I eat you too fast, you burn my tongue. This stanza explains how the author is eating the sticky rice. Think back to the article. How do people in Laos eat sticky rice? They eat them, one, with big bites. I know that they eat them with their hands because that's correct. We learned that detail from the article. There's also another line. It says, you never fail to fill. What do you think that is emphasizing here? Yeah, I think it means like they are satiated by this particular rice. It fills them up as far as nutrition-wise and keeps them not as hungry for a while. So I'm going to read the last stanza without interruption so you can get a better idea of the flow of the poem, but be on the lookout for the theme, the message of the poem in this final stanza. And Mom says I am crazy for eating too fast, but it don't matter when I can cool squeezed pebble-sized bits, dip you in fish soup or papaya salad. Cow now. My family sits together on the floor, legs folded, or on a dinner table. You cuddle inside our bellies, warm our lips all the way down our throats. In cold evenings with no heaters, you sacrifice to fill our stomachs so we can stick to each other and swallow our love whole. Don't worry if you didn't get it the first time as to what's happening. Poems are rarely understood after one reading, so I want to go back and look at just a couple of things. Did you notice how the author used the word our and we? We've already decided that when we saw the word I, it meant the speaker, and you is the grain of sticky rice, but when we think about our and we, what is the poet talking about? So I want you to add to our chart our and we, and think about that. Yeah, our and we is referring to the speaker's family here. And as I'm thinking back to the article we read, I know that there was a sense of togetherness that food can bring, and so that is shown here in this particular poem. I like this stanza because there are even more joyful and loving words and phrases like cuddle inside our bellies, warm our lips, swallow our love whole. What effect do you think these lines have on the tone of the poem? Remember, an ode is to try to make somebody happy. So if you were thinking about how this is expressing the fact that rice brings joy, you are absolutely correct. I think there's a joyful tone here. And let me read part of the last stanza once more. So think about the theme and think about the speaker and his family and the effect that sticky rice has on them. So starting right here, my family sits together on the floor, legs folded, or on a dinner table. You cuddle inside our bellies, warm our lips, all the way down our throats. In cold evenings with no heaters, you sacrifice to fill our stomachs so we can stick to each other and swallow our love whole. In these last few lines, we see how the author's speaker's love of sticky rice is similar to the love that he has for his family. It says here, so we can stick to each other. Notice the word we. The poet here isn't talking about the grains of rice. He's talking about his family. And I love that it says we can stick together because isn't that what sticky rice does? It sticks together just like his family here. So I think the poet's trying to make a comparison here. In general, poetry is not meant to be read in chunks, how we separated it today. So I'd recommend that you go back and reread this poem on your own in full. That way you can hear the flow of the poem better. Maybe after another reading, you will better understand and be able to visualize and get a better understanding of the poem as a whole. So I want to go back and take a look at our final T-chart, and I want you to add number 10 there, so we can stick to each other. Again, that's referring to the family sticks together like rice. So I went ahead and added that one, and you can do that now. For your independent practice, you'll be writing your own ode poem. So before you do, I want you to take a closer characteristic of an ode. Okay? Some simple characteristics of an ode, and you can jot these down, are that its purpose is to show love for something. It pays tribute to or praises something. It includes figurative language like personification and simile. We saw that throughout as we have written on our chart, so you can go back and use that to help you. It uses descriptive language to explain everyday actions, events, or things. Uses specific word choice to create a positive tone. Remember, an ode is to show gratification of something, and it may include multiple layers of meaning. So listen carefully as I explain your independent activity. You are going to write an ode about a food that is significant to you. You may write about the same food that you wrote about in lesson 17, or you can choose a new type of food. Make sure that your writing uses the various characteristics of odes that we discussed. Again, those are listed on your screen, so if you want to take a screenshot of that, I would recommend doing so. Also, feel free to use the poem that we read as an example. Your ode should be at least 20 lines, and it may be that you choose to rhyme your poem, or you can write in free verse, just as the poem we read today. Again, have fun writing a poem/ode about a food that is significant to you. I enjoyed reading a poem and building more knowledge about sticky rice and about Laos with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me into your home. I'll look forward to seeing you in our next at-home learning series lesson for literacy for Tennessee. Bye.